Welcome to the 1404 Performance Journey from Mental Health to High Performance session with myself, Danny Crates, and my good friend and business partner, Andrew Cohen-Ray. Now, many people that have been successful in life know that the journey to high performance is never an easy ride. It's often a rocky one. But I think this next session will highlight that. This shows if we don't look after our mental performance, high performance, let alone performance itself, can be very, very difficult. So Andy, it's over to you, mate.
So hi everybody, thanks Danny for the kind introduction. I'm Andy Cohen-Ray, the other half of Team 1404. What I'm going to do is take you through my journey, my life, my history, and some of that is missing, so I'll come on to that in a minute. So a little bit about me then. My main day-to-day work is what's called a mental performance coach, where I work with this part of the body, as well as being an athletics coach and things like that, where we mainly work from the neck down. I'm more interested in this little bit here, the bit that drives us, and all those kinds of weird and wonderful things that our brains can and cannot do for us. Now, doing this mental performance work, I've created my own kind of mind management tool. For those of you that read books, you'd have come across things like the chimp paradox, black box thinking, things like that. And I've kind of coined my own version, my own system that I work to, that now me and Danny use as 1404. I've been very fortunate, as well as working with athletes from every level, from complete beginners, Special Olympic athletes, all the way through to kind of national standard, international standard, Olympic level athletes. And I'm also very, very fortunate to work with some phenomenal racing drivers in the Formula One world as well, which is really exciting. And that work I do through McLaren with the F1 team there. So mainly looking after development drivers, some of their test drivers, some of the sim stuff, and just making sure that their heads are in a good place while they're driving at a couple of 100 miles an hour in a circle. And then also been very fortunate, lucky to work on some exciting projects with some younger drivers as well on the McLaren DNA project, where we're taking youngsters on a journey from go-kart to Formula One, which is really, really exciting. And then my own driving, I've done a little bit of called precision driving, some of the stuff where it's all going sideways, lots of smoke, lots of noise. I really enjoy that stuff. And then I'm very lucky this season to be stepping back into a race car, or sitting back in a race car again for this season, once it kicks off, because at the moment it's not happening. So working hard behind the scenes to get fit physically, mentally, ready for when those lights go out. And this season I'm going to be racing in a little Ginetta G40, but I'm going to come on to that later because I've got a whole world of more exciting stuff to talk about. So what we have here, this slide is is what I call a memory bank. It's basically 2007 backwards to 1997. So there's 30 years of memory as such, all intertwined, all mingled in. Lots of wonderful things: family, children, kids, running, holidays, you name it, it's there. And then what happened is I was, during the time, sort of around 2007, I was just coming out of the police force, or the police service, where I'd sort of been predominantly a driver and racing people around the country, doing some really, really exciting stuff. But along that way, as well as doing the exciting stuff with fast cars and guns and things like that, I had to do the normal sort of more day-to-day stuff that the police service probably isn't so much maybe known about. And during this time, during my service, I ended up working on a lot of incidents and jobs or calls, whatever you want to call them, where I was dealing with a lot of sort of fatalities and dead bodies. And all told, in my career, I've witnessed and dealt with over 180 dead bodies in total. So that's a massive, massive amount of trauma. Now, they may be a whole range of things like road traffic accidents, suicides, murders, Potter's Bar rail crash, just old people just passing away through natural causes, and a whole world of trauma, I should say, is probably the best way of putting that. So lots of different things, lots of different scenarios that we go to as police officers. And being on a kind of a predominantly male orientated or male team, we didn't do so much of the talking stuff, because it was just job to job to job to job. We didn't have the kind of support and things going on that we probably needed. And then what happened, so on the 13th of April 2007, I had a breakdown. My brain just went, I cannot cope with all of these horrific nightmares, the trauma, the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder that I was dealing with. And on that day, like I say, the 13th of April 2007, that memory bank was completely wiped. Now, I ended up going to the hospital. I took myself there because at the time my daughter Chloe was only 6 months old, so very, very young. She was asleep. It was late at night, and I didn't want to sort of wake her up and all that hassle that goes with waking a baby at sort of 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So I took myself to the hospital. But when I arrived, I ended up there as an unknown man, or what we would call in the police an unknown man. So I'd had a breakdown as such, a kind of a mental breakdown, I guess, from leaving home and arriving at hospital. And so I turn up at reception. Physically, I'm okay. I'm walking, talking, it's all good. And then the receptionist on the desk asks that question, probably the most simplest question in the world. I'll just take some details. What's your name? And I stood there for probably what felt like an age, but was actually just a few seconds. And I didn't have a clue. I had no idea what my name was. And then she's like, okay, so where have you come from? And I was like, yeah, I don't know, date of birth. And I was just racking my head, but it was completely empty. There wasn't anything in there, unfortunately. Some may say things haven't changed to today, but I was there and I couldn't, I just couldn't recall this vital information. So I was then asked if I was drinking or if I was on drugs and things like that. And I was, no, I'm an athlete. I'm an athlete. I'm fit as a fiddle. I'm fit and healthy. It's all good. It's just something up here isn't working. So I then spent 6 months in Colchester in a psychiatric unit in a mental health hospital. On the side of the general hospital there, and 6 months there, and I spent many a time being tested with lots of scans and brain scans and X-rays and MRIs, you name it. I've had it, but plenty of medication as well to help with the kind of the anxiety and things that were going on. And eventually, I was diagnosed as having dissociative amnesia. So what my brain had done, I had dissociated. I'd kind of taken myself away from all of the trauma and all of the horrible stuff by forgetting about it. Now, some would say this is an amazing kind of very useful tool to have. And yeah, in some circumstances, it's very good because you don't remember things like your mother-in-law and all these kinds of things, which is really, really useful. But unfortunately, the filter doesn't work. It doesn't sort of differentiate between the good memories and the bad memories, or the kind of stuff you do want to retain and the stuff you don't. So it was just a kind of a white slate. It just took it all clean, and that was it. So I had no idea I was married. I had no idea I had a 6-month-old daughter. No idea I was being in the police, other jobs I'd had, friends, family, school, work, everything. So from 2007, I kind of started again. And it was very, very hard, very, very difficult indeed, probably more for those around me, because what was happening is, and why I've put the 51st date slide up, is because the amnesia was so severe, I would only be able to retain new memories and new knowledge or facts for about 24, 48 hours. So instead of the movie where the lady wakes up in the morning and it's clean, my kind of stuff would just disappear throughout the day, sort of as and when it wanted to. There was no rules with it. It would just come and would go. So I would maybe see Danny on a Monday, and then on the Wednesday, I'd have no idea. I'd seen him, we had a meeting, a coffee, a run, or whatever it may be, which is really hard because then you have to kind of relearn it again and re-go over it again. So what I have what I kind of have are kind of pieces of information that people have given me. So my memory now from 2007 backwards is a knowledge. It's what friends and family have told me, and then what I've done is started to piece that together as things have gone on, and that's the that's the hard bit. It's having these bits of knowledge, and you kind of, do you trust the knowledge you're given? Do you trust the bits of information you're given? How do you piece it together? And that's really, really tricky to do.
That's really interesting. So is it a case of, this is just like we would use goal setting as an athlete, or we use it in business, or we use processes in business? It's putting a process in place to just do the simplest of things that we all take for granted, which is to remember.
Yeah, definitely. And I would have to write as much stuff down as I possibly could. So I would, simple things like making a cup of coffee. How do you know how you take your coffee? So I would start out by putting coffee in, some hot water, and I'd have a black coffee. I would taste it and I didn't like it. So I would then add some milk, and it still didn't taste quite right. It tasted a little bit better, but not quite right. I'd put one sugar in, it's better. Put two sugars in, oh, it tastes really good. I put three sugars in, I would spit it out. So I soon learned that I would take my coffee, milk, and two sugars just through process of elimination. But things like, how did I get around town when I was allowed back out as such? When I was sort of back in society and back home, how did I remember, where to go? I would have meetings at the hospital, the doctors, and things like that. But I would write everything down and kind of have sort of trigger points in there, so that I would know if I'm going to one place, if I was going to the athletics club. My athletics club are amazing. They wrote a book and put their photos of themselves in there. So I would read the book before I went. And when I was dropped off at athletics, I would recognize people from my book, and kind of a little bit of knowledge around how I knew them. So I wouldn't have those awkward conversations when I turned up to training each week, which is really cool, which is really useful. And you kind of, having that support network around you to enable you to lead a normalish life is really, really powerful.
How frustrating was it though when you would have to relook at the book every 24 to 48 hours to remind yourself who people were, especially the near and the dear?
Yeah, very difficult indeed, because sometimes you would forget about the book. So that was quite tricky in itself. Because if you have a weekend off and you're just at home, um, I wouldn't need the kind of some of the information that was in the book. And things like going away for sort of a week or so, just to give my wife at the time some peace and quiet and some respite from me. I would then go stay with my mum. But there's always that underlying anxiety about, what if I forget my wife again? What if I forget my daughter again? So you're constantly, you kind of, your fight, flight, and freeze stuff is constantly on high alert, because you're like, what if I forget? What if I forget? So you kind of become very, very anxious about things, and you're worrying all the time about, what if I forget? What if I forget? And then you kind of forget that you forgot. So it's a lot easier for me forgetting than it is for people that I forgot, because obviously they still know me. And you have these really awkward have these really awkward meetings in the high street where somebody recognizes you from school and you haven't got a blooming clue who they are. And the best piece of advice one of the psychiatrists gave me was, just blag it. Just ask questions, and you'll soon be given information, and then you can kind of piece together how you know that person, or you can maybe get your book out and piece those pieces together. But it was definitely a lot harder for those around me than it was for me, because I didn't know any different, and I could just forget. It's quite easy in some ways.
I was trying to find a better word to use, but can you remember the times when you was told again, as your memory started to come back, but when you're being told that you have a wife and a child, did that evoke anger as well as the frustration that went with it?
Yeah, you do go through some seriously angry phases. Is probably anger the right Yeah, maybe it probably is. You kind of get angry, then you get really upset, um, and it's very very hard. But again, it's kind of harder for those around me really. And the thing with the dissociative condition is that your kind of your emotions are very flat. You would day to day, it was just very, very grey. So you wouldn't get massively upset, you wouldn't get massively happy. You just kind of tread a flat line of grey emotion, really. But there are some times where that does get overridden by, yeah, pure anger and frustration. And then the next day you've forgotten it, so it's okay. um, and you're moving forward again. And that's the key to it, I guess, is the moving forward bit, and just trying to gain as much knowledge as you can and try to piece together your life as much as you can and document it so you can get on and keep moving forward.
See, our memories generally are just full of pictures, sounds, smells, videos of things that happen in our lives. It's just created of all this stuff that we can tap in and out and recall when we need to. But you was building yours on paper. So, and just through all these books. And then was there a point where suddenly it started to stick and certain things were staying with you, i.e., waking up, starting to wake up every day and realizing and remembering that you had a daughter and you had a wife?
Yeah, so for nearly 2 years, until sort of 2009, it was a 24, 48 hour thing, and it was a constant writing things down as a memory tool as such. And from 2009, it was around probably July-ish, I think. He says forgetting. um, so it's probably from around middle of 2009 that things start to stick, and then you kind of surprise yourself because you'll see somebody and you'll know them, and actually they're more surprised than you are because they're expecting you to forget. And then you start to go, oh, hang on, maybe I do remember. Hmm, okay. And that kind of freaks you out a little bit, and then it would start to build and build and build. um, and now, I'm now, what, 42 years old, with a sort of a 13-ish year, yeah, 12, 13-year memory as such. No, it's not, it's 11 years, isn't it? 2020. Yeah, like I say, a lot of the maths and stuff I learned at school unfortunately isn't there, so I have to do my maths in my head, which takes me a little bit of time. So yeah, so from 2009 to now, there's 11 years of memory as such. So predominantly it's still pretty empty in here, which is good because I'm now like a sponge and I can just take in lots of information and things. And you tend to remember stuff a lot more clearer, and yeah, it's just a lot easier because it's all there now. Well, I say it's all there. The last 11 years are there, which is good. But yeah, the key stuff is still missing, unfortunately. But I don't know any different, so it's okay.
I mean, the thing is, I guess you couldn't choose what you lost because you had a complete wipe, everything went. But then you can't also choose what you're relearning. So with the good times is coming the bad times when you're having the memory start to come back.
Yeah, and definitely, and that leads quite nicely onto the next slide around some of the horrific stuff that does come back, and that's probably caused more trauma in itself, in effect, because what was happening was while I was sleeping at night time, sometimes during the day, you would have to often have these sort of nightmares or night terrors, day terrors, and you have these flashbacks of jobs, incidents, things like that you've been to. But the thing is, you don't remember being there, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of having a real life nightmare that if you were to have, if you have a flashback or something to something that happened in your past, you kind of know that you've been there when you wake up in the morning or when you process that dream or nightmare, whatever you want to call it. And one of the things that I worked on was the Sower murders. And, you know, I remember having this, I don't remember, I had this horrible flashback, horrible nightmare. And what I did is I wrote the detail down in my diary, and then sort of went to the nurse in the morning after having a, you know, a very rough night's sleep, and kind of went, have you got any idea what this is? You know, thankfully some of my ex-colleagues in the police service were really, really good. And they were able to talk me through it and kind of give me some background and knowledge and history around the sort of the role I played on this job, and the things I did. And you know, that helped to piece this together, which was great. My handwriting hasn't got any better, unfortunately, but interestingly, day to day, the handwriting would change, probably depending on my mood or what was going on in on the ward at the time, because it's not a very nice place to be. So yeah, very interesting. But yeah, my handwriting does change, and my drawing certainly hasn't improved either. But it does kind of leave a good, you know, a good memory of what I did do, and some of the stuff I've seen. So obviously, once I started to get better, I couldn't go back to being a police officer, because that would be probably quite dangerous, having a police officer that doesn't remember things. You know, how would I remember law, and, you know, when to stop a car and not stop a car and things like that. But one of the interesting things that I could remember, or I did remember to do, was to drive. And I kind of had this inner feeling that I could drive. It's probably a bit like riding a bike. If you don't ride one for years, you know you can get on and do it. And it's really, really weird to explain. But I knew I could drive, and I just knew. So I ended up having to take my driving test again, which was fine. I had no problems with that. I relearned the highway code because it's empty in here; it all goes in. So yeah, I was able to relearn and you know, get back out driving again. And I only got one minor mark, which was really cool. I was happy with that when I retook my test, and I got that minor mark for straightening out a roundabout. Now, those of you that are advanced drivers or have done advanced driving will know that that's what you do. You don't go around the long way, you kind of cut across. So I got a little minor mark for that, but that was okay. So I started working for a Porsche specialist, which was great because I got to drive some amazing cars. And you can see the picture there of my daughter Chloe, who's sort of nearly 2 in that picture. And I got to take her to nursery in a nice cabriolet, which is really cool. And in that role, you know, I was moving cars around the country. I didn't need to know how to remember, because I could drive, and that was okay. So I would go and collect cars from all around the country and parts of Europe and things like that. And it was great. I would just be given a postcode, and I'd follow that, and off I go. Then I just type in home, and off I come back. It's really easy. And then, yeah, working with Porsche itself on a bit of testing and development work. So it's very, very fortunate to work on the Cayman, the Porsche Cayman, which predominantly is a Boxster with a roof, and the Cayman S. And amazing times, because I was an ultimate crash test dummy, because I didn't have the kind of knowledge of what was too fast, or I wouldn't get scared, because I don't remember being scared. So I could push the car to its limits, as opposed to the human that's sat in there that often will only drive as fast or push himself as fast as his limit as such. So I was recreating my own limits, which was great. So I could crash a car and would go, okay, that's too fast. But thankfully, I wouldn't kind of remember a couple of days later, so I could go out and do it again and then find that limit. And it was good. So yeah, many crazy day racing around in nice fast cars. But the beauty was, it wasn't my insurance, it wasn't my fuel, certainly wasn't my tires. So, you know, what's not to like about that? Then, you know, after doing that for a while, I ended up at Heathrow Airport, which was really cool. And I was moving celebrities, VIPs. I was a VIP royalty driver, in effect, driving a nice BMW 7 Series around the airport at 20 miles an hour. A bit frustrating, but it is what it is. That's the rules. So I would take passengers, these VIP celebrities, from Terminal 5 to their plane, to different parts of the airport. And then I would pick them up from their plane and drive them back. So that was really, really cool. But the beauty of that role was, you know, Heathrow in itself is a huge village, and the routes, and, you know, remembering all of the stands, all the stand numbers at Terminal 5, Terminal 1, Terminal 2, Terminal 3, etc., etc. I could read the map and bang, it would go in. It's a bit like the London knowledge that the taxi drivers have to learn. And I would just take it in and I would go, which was great. So I became a really safe pair of hands, because often these people would arrive very lastminute.com, and you've got to get them to this, got to get them to the stand to catch their flight, because the pilot's not going to wait, no matter what your name is or your celebrity status or royal family member status. He's got to go, because it costs a lot of money to miss that slot. So, you know, to be able to get there and get them to the right plane at the right stand was really important. So because of that kind of unique ability, I got to drive the sort of more people slightly higher up the celebrity and royal family status, which was great, because I could be relied on, and you know, I knew where I was going, which was good. Because the worst thing you want to do is get lost with somebody in the back of the plane and they miss their flight, which did happen to some people, but that's another story. So, you know, that was amazing. Really, really good times driving, you know, stepping into people's lives for 4, 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how far you drove them, which was really, really cool. But then, you know, this isn't an easy journey. This isn't a roller coaster journey. And then, unfortunately, on the 30th of November 2012, my younger brother Matt, decided he didn't want to be in this world anymore, and he made the choice to take his own life, which he did by standing in front of a train. And you know, a really, really tough day to get that phone call. I've been to many suicides, both on the rail, hangings, things like that, but to be on the receiving end of a phone call, having been told that your brother's done what he's done, was very, very hard, very, very difficult times indeed. And it was made even harder because I'd only really remember my brother from 2009 to 2012. So I've only really got 3 years of getting to know him again, which is really hard. So it's probably harder than losing a brother that I've known for 30 odd years, if that makes sense. Because you know it's your brother, but you know, there's a lot of life missing there, which is really, really difficult.
It's interesting that you've put changes forever, because there's lots of things that happen to us in our lives, and we adapt to them and we move on. But there's some things that change your life forever, and you can never change back. And this falls massively into that bracket.
Yeah, there's two things we talk about this, and you know this more than anybody, Danny. There's, you know, it's either life-changing or it's life-defining. And that goes back to my amnesia stuff as well. I could have, you know, I could have sat on the sofa all day and said, I don't remember anything. I'm not going to go to work. I'm not going to go on and do some amazing driving or things like that. And it's the same with this, you know, suicide, you know, for my brother was very defining. That was it, end of life. But for me, it's life changing. And I don't use it as an excuse not to do things, if that makes sense. It's, you know, very, very hard thing to deal with. But, you know, my brother made what he felt was the right decision for him at the time. I'm okay with that. I get that. Might not agree with it, but it, you know, it is what it is, and you know, he's made that choice at that time. Very, very difficult, but it's something that has changed me massively. It has to, but it's how I move forward after that. That's the turning point. That's the critical point along this journey, and that's why I do so much talking about it, because it's really, really important. And I know what the effect of losing somebody to suicide is. So, you know, I'm a great advocate for men, talking about mental health, talking about suicide, in a hope that somebody realizes the impact it has, and hopefully they don't make that choice or feel that there is an alternative choice to what's going on in their world. And that's probably more prevalent than ever in the circumstances of this pandemic we find ourselves in. So it is, you know, it is life changing, but we have to keep moving forward. You know, again, I can't sit down and just grieve 24/7, because that's not healthy for me and those around me. So it is, it's life changing, and we keep moving forward. Now, again,
2 questions there, really, Andy. Is one, you've dealt with some of it yourself because you dealt with the dissociative amnesia. And when we're dealing with stuff ourselves, as I know myself very well, um, it's almost easier to deal with what you're dealing with, right? So with the dissociative amnesia, you're going through the process yourself. And you said it when you spoke a little bit earlier, the fact that it's often harder for the people around you. So how much harder was this one to deal with because you wasn't in control? And then kind of how did you deal with it? How did you move on from that traumatic moment in your life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Again, those around me were hurting. I was hurting. Don't get me wrong, but those around me, those people like my mum who obviously remembers my brother from when he's born. He was 32. So he took his life at 32. So she's got 32 years of memory of him. So that's really really hard, and that hit my mum massively. My mum took to drinking quite heavily after this, and 2015 she passed away through liver failure. Pretty much, she kind of almost drunk herself to death. So for my mum, you could say that my brother's decision was life defining for her, because she obviously felt that there wasn't a way of moving forward in a healthy, happier way. So she took to the drink, which is really really hard. And but again, I made decisions that again, it wasn't going to define me. I was going to do some good with this. I was going to go on and go run a marathon for mine, the mental health charity, in memories of his honor, which was really important for me, and kind of using my legs to do my talking and promoting. It seemed like the logical and most powerful thing to do, and it kind of gave me a bit of focus again, because I then got something positive to do, or something positive to make of this this horrific tragedy that's happened to my family. To go out and raise awareness, raise the profile of suicide, talk about it, because white middle-aged men don't talk about mental health and suicide and how it impacts them. So I'm almost in a bit of a minority here, but it's it seems like the logical thing to do, because I just hope that one person, here's my journey, here's my story, it saves them or a family member maybe from making those choices. And to me, that's job done. Just one person, I'll be really really happy with that. So it's good to talk.
Do you think that the last question is, I mean, we say everything happens for a reason, and I don't mean with your brother, but the fact that you had dissociative amnesia and there's still an element of the dissociative side to it, that helped you cope with the loss of your brother?
Yeah, I think so. It's they're all kind of coping mechanisms, really, aren't they? The dissociative amnesia is a way of being able to forget, means I could cope with what I had or hadn't seen, which was really really powerful. And I don't know, the amnesia probably helped with the suicide, because, or to a degree, because you've only got a small amount of memory of your brother, which probably makes it a little bit easier for me. But like I say, it's hard when you see those around you really, really struggling with it. Because, like I say, my mum's, 30 odd years of memory of my brother. And yeah, it hit her pretty, pretty hard. And yeah, I guess I've got different ways of dealing, different ways of coping, different strategies is probably the good word there, of dealing with things. And I know what happens if you don't talk about it, for two reasons. A, it bit me on the backside with the amnesia, and two, with my brother not talking about things, it drove him down a road where he saw no other way. So, for me, talking and even going through these slides again, and that's why I can talk about it quite openly, because it's almost a therapy session for me in a way. It's good for me to talk about this and to kind of get it out there again and just keep talking. Those watching have probably said I've spoke too much. Sorry.
You said as well, I mean, for you, you wanted to move on. You wanted to this not to define you, really. So you moved on and you set about doing what you do best, which is running.
Yeah, you would have thought it would have been quite easy as following a 6-month plan. or probably not quite a 6 month, 16-week plan for a London Marathon schedule. You know, Danny, you've done this many a times yourself now, 3-4 times now. You know, following a simple 16-week process is quite easy. But again, like I say, this journey is a full emotional roller coaster, mentally and physically. You know, and that training 2 weeks out from London Marathon, when I was probably in the best shape of my athletics career almost. You know, I was hoping for, you know, I was looking at running well under 3 hours. I was in really, really, really good shape because I just put all my energy and focus into training. But unfortunately, what was happening at work wasn't in such a good place. And again, you know, we were going through a massive transformation process, and being a creature of habit and kind of being somebody with the memory problems who needs routine, I need structure, I need to know what I'm doing every day. When that's thrown into chaos, I guess, when it's when your boss throws a spanner in the works and says, right, instead of doing this, you're going to do this, my brain just couldn't cope with it. And I, you know, it was almost like all the wires in here just instead of being in straight lines, were just massively intertwined, and, you know, all over the place. And I just couldn't process what was happening. And it was as simple as I couldn't have every other weekend off to see my daughter, because that's what I do. I see my daughter Chloe every weekend. It's all good, and then suddenly your boss says, I need you to work 3 on 4 off on this new shift pattern. I just couldn't process that, and it got quite messy. And unfortunately, 2 weeks before I was due to run the London Marathon for Mind mental health charity, I ended up having a stroke, which was another real tough, bitter sort of pill to swallow. And it was just my body's way. The way I've kind of accepted this is it was my body's way of going, Andy, sit down, mate. Just sit down and process. Because what was happening is my brain was going at 1,000 miles an hour. I had all this change going on at work. I probably still hadn't worked out what had happened with my brother. And I was, you know, I was only November, December, March. I was only 5 months in after losing my brother. So my head was in a proper spin. You're dealing with a mum who's drinking quite heavily and everything else that's going on off in life as well. And I guess my brain just went, sit down. So what I had was a full left side stroke. Face had gone, arm, leg, the lot. Not good. 2 weeks before London Marathon is not the best preparation by any means. But again, I guess I'm not one for sitting around. And that's where you know, we talk about, again, life changing, life defining, got to keep moving forward. You know, I was on a ward of 6 people. I was the youngest person on the ward by probably a good 30-40 years, I should think. Full of very sick old men and one lady who had all had strokes also. Really, really hard. And I didn't want to be on that ward any longer than I had to. So, you know, I had to get my trainers on and get out of there as quick as I could. And that's what I did. And then 1 year on, I was there. I did it. I ran it. I think I ran about 3:20 something. Not too shabby, but should have been a lot quicker.
How important was it for you to have that goal? Something to look forward to, something to aim for, to get to London, not only get to London, but to run London?
Yeah, massively. It was massively important. Now, going back to when I had the stroke, it was 2 weeks before. I actually made it to London Marathon on that day. So I think it was 7-8 days after having my stroke, I managed to walk off the ward. And pure stubbornness, ignorance, pure bloody mindedness, whatever you want to call it. I was motivated. My attitude was, I don't want to be here. I know as soon as I got home, I would start to get better quicker. So I worked really hard. I would sit in my bed with a squeezy ball, and I would squeeze that for 8-10 hours a day. And I remember the guy sat opposite me go, what the are you doing with that ball? I was like, I'm squeezing it. But actually what's happening, my left hand wasn't it wasn't moving, so it wasn't working. In here, what I was doing was squeezing it really hard, because I knew if I could get this bit working and I could tell my hand to squeeze, it would eventually squeeze. And I think a day and a half later, I got a twitch in my finger. Then I got a second twitch and a third twitch. And then I managed to put two fingers up to the guy opposite me and said, there you go. And he'd been sat there for weeks, not doing his physio, not doing what he was told. And again, life changing, life defining. He'd almost gone, I've had a stroke, can't do anything. Whereas I was going, yes, I had a stroke, but I want to get out of here. The other motivation was the coffee was horrific. And, there was a Costa coffee downstairs. So my motivation was to get off the ward, get my physio done, get down and get a coffee. And my deal with the physio was, if I could go down and buy myself a coffee, she'd let me go home. So 7-8 days later, I was downstairs paying for my coffee. And then a day later, I was released. And then on the day of the marathon, obviously I couldn't run because I was still walking with a massive limp and things and getting quite fatigued. But I did make it down there to watch the race. And that was really, really important. But running it the following year was just a real emotional roller coaster. And I remember running up the mile with all the noise, the cheering, and just, got massively overwhelmed and thinking, where was I last year? I was on a stroke ward, but here I am this year running, 3 hours 20, whatever. And I'd gone through a world of physio, a world of pain to get fitter, stronger, mentally and physically. And also going through change at work, so I can no longer drive at work because I had a stroke. So you're now put on a different, different part of the business. Obviously can't sack me. HR get involved. It's a bit griefy. So I've now got a new role. I'm now, I'm now running a marathon, and it was amazing. And Richard in the picture actually ran it the year before. So I've got a picture of me or him holding me up because I was absolutely exhausted. And this year he's holding me up again because I'm massively exhausted. Which was really cool. But you kind of look at these things, you look at these decisions, these choices, and, I'm a great believer of every cloud has a silver lining. It's all happened for a reason. And, that journey of, having the mental health stuff with losing my brother, the stroke, because I look at the stroke as a mental health thing as opposed to a physical health thing, if that makes sense, because it is my body going, Andy, just sit down and sort your head out, really. And it was, completely driven by, a mental thing. So, every cloud has a silver lining meant that I was put onto a different team. I was put onto a continuous improvement team. And I learned a world of science. I learned, a lot more knowledge around process improvement, how to do things faster, quicker, easier, potentially cheaper, more efficiently. And as an athlete, that's a really, really powerful thing to learn, because we all want to run quicker, faster, more efficiently. We want to, and certainly as racing drivers, we want to get around the track as efficiently as we can, as quick as we can. So we have a lot of processes, and especially with my amnesia, I really got process. So process improvement was right up my street. So, thankful to Heathrow, they taught me all this wonderful knowledge. And then, a year or so later down the line, once I'd, gained on this knowledge, I took the leap and, I set myself up in business, working, with athletes and their minds. So, not only working with athletes, but also working with racing drivers, Formula One drivers, Formula 2 drivers, which was really, really cool stuff. And I got to put all this process stuff into place, all this psychology stuff I'd learned around behaviors and attitudes and why we do things. But I was also, it was almost a therapy session for myself, because I gained so much knowledge and understanding around why humans do things. Why would somebody, take their own life? Why would somebody, dissociate by amnesia? So going through all this human psychology stuff was really, really useful for me, and kind of combining it with the therapist sort of work I was doing gave me a massive, understanding of how humans tick and operate, why they do things, why they behave, why they act. Massive learning. So, and it's then led me on this wonderful path of not only being self-employed. So if I want a weekend off to see my daughter, I can have it. I don't have all that stress and grief, which is great. And then, that's then led me on to meet, my now sidekick, we're like the ant and deck, aren't we? Which is great. And you know, and through, you know, some, you know, again, random circumstances, and bumped into Danny. And there is a story about that we did race each other many years ago back in Cambridge. Unfortunately, I genuinely can't remember who won. And Danny has run so many races. Yeah, here we go. And this is where it gets interesting. So normally when I'm talking on a stage on my own, I would tell everybody I won that race. But as Danny's in the room, and often when he's talking on his own, he would have tell everybody he won that race. But sadly, neither of us remember, and we can't find the blooming results. But hey hum. So I'll take the victory on that one, because I've muted him on this call, so he can't get his word in. But you know, me and Danny have come together. You know, Danny in his own right is an absolute blooming legend, and love him to bits. You know, he's done some amazing stuff, gone through massive, you know, physical adversity and trauma, and again come out the other side. But I'm not going to talk too much about his journey, because guess what? We've got another journey to film for you, where Danny will do more talking and I'll do more questions, which is great. But you know, we've come together and we've taken our learning as, you know, Danny as a high performer, myself as a high performer, and we've now put that into how we help businesses and giving them that kind of that athlete mindset of how to be the best in the world. Just put it into a business language, really, which is really cool. And we're nearly 3 years down the line now working together, which is great. And I say working together, which is great. We've, you know, the last month we haven't actually been in a room with each other, which has been quite challenging. But as anybody else that's, you know, dealt with something that's life changing, we've just adapted and moved forward. No different to what we do if we have amnesia or we lose an arm. We just sort of, we deal with it and we crack on the best way we know how. And that's what's setting us apart at the moment within business coaching. You know, we've got real first-hand experience of going through adversity, how to be resilient, creating mental strength, all these kinds of things, positive mindsets. And we deliver that in business, and it's great. And we get to go all around the world, and it's amazing. Absolutely love my work at the moment. And I do miss Danny's coffees, but it won't be long now, and we can get back onto that. So, you know, that's what we've been doing, which is great. And here we are. And it is quite ironic that we're always standing. I think we really are the ant and deck of business, because we're always stood on the same side. And even as I look at the screen now, Danny's sat to my right there, which is really, really cool. And, you know, it's great stuff. It's great stuff. But you don't need to know too much about that here. So what am I up to as well now? I'm getting back in a race car, which is really exciting. The bit that does niggle me a bit is obviously we can't race at the moment. So that race car you can see there is sat on my drive, and it stares at me every morning when I open the curtains. That hurts. And I know that it's there and I can't drive it and I can't race it. But, you know, I've been spending this time in lockdown to the best of my ability. I've been doing this PE with Joe Malarkey. I'm now fitter, you know, my upper body's a lot fitter and stronger. I now fit into my polo shirt, which is great. I've lost a few pounds, which is awesome. I feel great, you know, physically, mentally, I'm in really good shape. I've got a simulator in the house, so I'm able to get the laps in, learn the tracks, learn the corners, and those times are improving. And even last night at Alton Park, I've dropped 6 seconds over, you know, 2-3 week period that I've had to simulate. So again, it's all constant improvement, continuous improvement, learning how to go faster, quicker, more efficiently, which is great. So that's what I'm up to this season, with a nice sticker car with all our logos on, which is really, really exciting. So that's kind of where my journey ends, I guess. And this is where we find ourselves today.
I mean, Andy, that I've heard your story many times. I've been on the platform with you, and Andy, you've alluded to a number of times, you know, the fact that we can't be together now. Just in case anyone's watching this video in the future, this was filmed during self-isolation and lockdown. So myself and Andy, the big change for us was we've always worked together. We've always been side to side. We pride ourselves on the fact that when we work for businesses, we'll never take on a contract with a business and then suddenly one of us is busy doing something else, so they only get ant or deck. They'll always get both of us together, because that's what we want business to be. We want it to be Danny and Andy, or DNA as Andy likes to call us. But I think the one thing that really stands out for me with your journey, Andy, and it's one thing we work a lot with, on a lot with people, is resilience. And a question I've never asked you before, really. From what you've learned about yourself as a younger person, did you always have resilience, or is it something you've learned and now have in abundance? Because it seems like you do have the ability to bounce back, and you've had to bounce back many times in your life.
So you're asking a question to a chap who doesn't remember. Has he always been resilient? That's a really good question.
I did ask for what you've learned about when you were younger.
Okay. I'll let you off on that one. But no, you're right. It actually started at a very young age, because my mum and dad split up when I was around 11 years old. And, kind of in the late 80s, parents splitting up back then wasn't a common thing. And, I think I was second year at secondary school. And I was certainly the only person in the class from a broken home. And, you've got a younger brother to look after as well. And I think, being brutally honest, that's where the trauma started. That's where it all started to potentially go wrong for me. And, not long after my mum and dad split up, I started running, which is interesting. And, as athletes, we normally run towards a finish line. It's all about the finish line. We're running towards something, but actually what I was doing was running away. And that's kind of where I probably started dissociating, by getting away from stuff, was through running. So running became my therapy as a way to get away from what was going on at home. And that's where my focus and my passion lay. So I probably did become quite resilient from a very, very early age, because the trauma started at an early age, I guess, if that makes sense.
But the one thing you have learned now is resilience is not just about just bouncing back and carrying on. It's about bouncing back, protecting yourself, and making sure that you're in the best mental and physical shape to move on as well.
Yeah, because if you don't, I guess if it's a bit like an injury, isn't it? If you have an injury on your knee, say, if you don't let it heal and then make it stronger, it's just going to go again. And it's the same with the brain. You've got to give it the space and time to recover and repair. Then you can go again. It's probably a good way of looking at it. But what was happening is I kept getting not bangs to the head, because they weren't physical traumas, but you've got the amnesia, you've got suicide, stroke. You're constantly being battered around the head, or you're constantly battering yourself around the head, and it doesn't give it time to repair. And that's where it then lets itself down again and again and again. So, being able to talk about this stuff and to get it out is really, really important for me. And it kind of, because it's out here, it's in the, because it's real. It means I can deal with it much better. And it then means I'm in a better place to then either take on more work or more stress or more whatever it may be in life. And that's how I keep moving forward. It's just, I know some days I get really, really tired. I just have to say, I need an hour's sleep. I just need to stop. And I need to take myself out for a run. So I'm now much more aware of these kinds of overwhelming kind of thoughts and processes that go on inside my head. And I go, do you know what? I'm done now. And I'll just take myself away. Otherwise, if I don't, I know I'll probably snap or get really grumpy or punch something or whatever comes out. So, it's a really good way of just going, you know, I need to have some rest, and I can have some sleep. Sleep is amazing for me. I sleep so much, but it's a good way of repairing and recovering, same as if you've got an injured knee.
I think the biggest sort of lesson for you along the way has been the awareness and the honesty, hasn't it? So you've learned the awareness of your own brain and when it needs a rest. Just like as an athlete, I had to be aware of when my body needed a rest. But you've learned the honesty that goes with it. The honesty to turn around to yourself and say, slow down. The honesty to turn around to others and say, I need to slow down. And that's kind of the message that you're really keen to put out now.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, we're going to talk about psychological safety and another thing, but being able to have that open conversation and go, I'm really struggling, whether that's to a boss, a friend, a family member, whatever that may be. That's where the magic is, to be able to put your hands up and say, I'm really struggling here. whether you need a half an hour nap, or whether you need time out, or whether you need a change in career, whatever that may look like. But to be able to have that honest conversation with somebody that's willing to take the time to sit down and listen and, get a bit of knowledge and understanding, because I'm quite a unique human being. So when you meet people and you're quite, quite quirky and quite process driven and things, and that's it's normal for me, but to other people they go, a bit odd. But once you explain how your brain, or how my brain works and how it ticks and operates, people go, oh, I get it. And then they kind of know what to give you, what not to give you, or what to push, what not to push, to get the best out of you. And that's the same with yourself. Once you know yourself and you've got this knowledge and understanding of how you tick and operate, you then know how to push and when not to push. It's a bit like racing, isn't it? You don't want to, you don't run an 800 meter by going flat out from the gun. You've got to know when's the right time to then push and accelerate for that win. And that's what you've got to use your brain for.
I think you've shown, Andy, and I hope everyone who watches this gets to understand the power of your own personal journey, and like you say, how unique it is. But it's a reminder that the journey to success is never an easy one. It doesn't have to be as traumatic as yours was, but anyone who's successful in business, anyone who's successful in sport, anyone who's successful in life will tell you they've had difficult times along the way. But you use the silver lining slide, you use it to show that no matter what you've been through, you've come out the other side and you've been able to achieve far beyond probably what your wildest dreams were.
Yeah, definitely. There's no such thing as an overnight success. And I'm not saying I'm massively highly successful. But it's, there is that journey. Richard Branson doesn't suddenly become, Mr. Branson. He's been on a horrific journey of businesses that he's had and lost, and that's the same in life. I've just gone through an emotional. Yes, my journey is massively extreme, so I don't expect you all to go out and forget things and have a stroke, because I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But it just goes to show the kind of the extremes that you can go through, but how you can come out the other side with the right attitude and mindset that's massively positive, to go on and achieve some amazing things. I get to sit and work with Danny every day. How cool is that? You're all jealous now, aren't you? But for me, that's amazing. And to think where I was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, it's all good in my world. But it's just making the right choice, making positive choices, making good choices. If you don't make a good choice, learn from it, move forward. Don't dwell on it.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the journey from mental health to high performance. Please visit the website www.1404performance.com to find out how Team 1404 Performance can help you individually and your business succeed and perform at a high level. And please, if you've got any questions, email us info@1404performance.com, and look out for some of the other videos that we've got out there. One of the others will be the journey to high performance. For this one, you'll see us switch around. I will be the one in the hot seat, and it will be Andy driving all the questions. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'd look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you.